We're now nearly 6 months removed from the catastrophic earthquake and tsunami in Japan that triggered a global nuclear catastrophe. And while some progress has been made to deal with this never-before-seen nuclear crisis, there's still a long way to go. A lot of questions still unanswered, and enormous risk still blanketing the nation of Japan and perhaps the world. So much so that world-renowned physician and anti-nuclear advocate Dr. Helen Caldicott recently issued a dire warning to the Japanese people. Not buying into the Japanese government's efforts to downplay the crisis, Dr. Caldicott warned people living in North Japan and around the crippled Fukushima reactors to get the hell out of the area. Dr. Caldicott said, "The number of people evacuated is nothing compared to the total number of people at risk in Fukushima, which has a population of around 2 million or so in the prefecture. People left there are at grave risk of developing cancer and leukemia. They will continue to be further contaminated because the material has landed on the soil, so concentrated in the food, and will continue to be taken in through the air as large amounts of radiation continues to leak out through the 3 damaged reactors and the 4 damaged fuel cores." Dr. Caldicott joins me now from Australia to talk more about this issue. Dr. Caldicott, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tom.
You were recently quoted, I just read the quote basically, as saying that everybody in northwest Japan should be evacuated. Is that so? And if so, why? Where should they go? And how long do they need to stay away?
I didn't actually say in the article everybody should be evacuated, but there are some very, very hot areas. An American plane 3 months after the accident went up with measuring facilities and measured 3 to 14.5 terabecquerels, 3 to 14.7 million becquerels in certain areas in Fukushima, when the evacuation zone in Chernobyl was 550,000 becquerels. So by orders of magnitude, people are living in incredibly dangerous areas. The Japanese government is not routinely measuring food, is not routinely measuring the radiation in areas throughout Japan. It is being thoroughly irresponsible, and may I say that North America has received quite a large fallout itself. There's just a report from Oklahoma that there's radiation there. And when you inhale a tiny amount of, say, plutonium into your lung, like 1/1,000,000th of a gram from Fukushima landing in Oklahoma, you will not know it's in your lung, but 15 or 20 years later, or a little longer, you may or almost certainly will develop lung cancer. But you won't know it's been caused by the plutonium from Fukushima you inhaled 20 years ago, because there's a long incubation time for cancer. In other words, we're going to see an incredible increase in cancer, leukemia, and down the time track, genetic disease, not just in Japan, but in the Northern Hemisphere, particularly North America.
What about people in the rest of Japan? For example, Tokyo, the most densely populated area. And also, how does this affect the fact that their diet is principally sea-based, and so much of this pollution has, this radioactive material has been exploded out or washed out into the sea?
Well, may you ask, Tom. They've poured out huge amounts of radiation into the Pacific Ocean. China has found cesium 300 times above normal, radioactive cesium in their water just off the Chinese coast. The fish imbibe, eat radioactive material, and it concentrates. First the algae concentrate it, then the crustaceans eat the algae, concentrate it further, then the little fish, then the big fish, and big fish swim thousands of miles over to the Pacific Northwest, for instance. Tuna, fish travel thousands of miles on the continents. The EPA is not routinely measuring the fish that are caught. They have no plans to do so. The Japanese people are at great risk. They love their seafood. Almost everything is fish or rice. Their rice, 50% of their rice crop is grown in the Fukushima province or near the reactor. So, and that's just about to come to harvest now. God knows what they will do. And they have found very hot spots in Tokyo. they have found radioactivity even south of Tokyo. So the accident is not over. There could be another earthquake. There have been 3 actual melt-throughs, which is unheard of in the history of the nuclear age. Melt through the container onto the floor. There could be massive hydrogen explosions still, or steam explosions. And building 4 is very unstable, and it's got a very hot cooling pool on top of it, and that, if there's another earthquake, that pool could collapse, the building could collapse, and God knows how much radiation could escape. No one knows how to end this accident. It's ongoing, and the scientists are very confused. Some say it might take 3 years to fix, some say decades. But we're in the middle of a medical catastrophe.
What can people in, for example, Tokyo, in the near proximity in the country, and people in the rest of the Northern Hemisphere, what can or should they and we be doing?
Well, we need the data, Tom, and that's not forthcoming. The Japanese government should be measuring all the food supplies, and if they're radioactive, banning them. But in fact, they're elevating the levels of radiation to which people, particularly children, can be exposed. No radiation is safe. Every dose you receive adds to your risk of getting cancer, particularly if you're eating radioactive food, and the isotopes lodge in various organs. Your liver, your lung, your brain are radiating just a few cells for many years, giving those cells a high dose. And almost inevitably, many will develop cancer. The other thing is they should be measuring the radiation in the soil thoroughly, systematically throughout Japan, and evacuating people from areas that are radioactive. They should be measuring the air, because the children are inhaling the air. Almost 50% of children of 1,000 children, almost 50% have radioactive iodine in their thyroid glands in a certain part of the Fukushima province. So those children are at great risk of developing thyroid cancer. We have data from Chernobyl to show now, from the New York Academy of Sciences report, that over 1 million people have died as a result of Chernobyl. Over 1 million. Well, now some people say that the accident at Fukushima is 3 to 5 times worse than Chernobyl. That radiation has spread around the Northern Hemisphere. I can't tell you as a physician, once you eat radioactive food, we can't get it out of your bodies. We can't.
I understand. Dr. Caldicott, I'm sorry we're out of time, but you made your point very well and very eloquently, and I very much appreciate your joining us tonight from Australia.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Let's not let this terrible lesson in Japan go to waste. Let's ditch nuclear power in the United States for good. It's the good, the bad, and the very, very asymmetrically ugly. The good. Janet Napolitano, the Homeland Security Director, said that some airport security changes should be coming down the pike soon. In an interview with Politico, Napolitano said, "We are moving towards an intelligence and risk-based approach to how we screen. I think one of the first things you will see over time is the ability to keep your shoes on." Wow. You mean like all the rest of the European countries were actually going to go back, except for the UK, to start rolling back the security theater trappings that gave us constant headaches at the airport? Let's hope Secretary Napolitano follows through with this, and that eventually we dump the Chertoff X-ray porno scanners as well. The bad. Fox so-called news. The mouthpiece of the Republican Party is trying to manufacture a controversy around tomorrow's Republican debate hosted by their rival NBC, citing that a number of Republicans were not invited to attend the debate, like Congressman Thaddeus McCotter, Buddy Roemer, and Gary Johnson, people I'm sure you've all heard about. Talking head Neil Cavuto had this hard-hitting observation.
So I'm calling this podium gate. Why not just add more podiums for legit candidates who come to the game with legit solutions to our problems? Surely the TV networks, I don't care how dire and poorly off they are, can figure out how to shoot a slightly more crowded stage. How can groundbreaking ideas ever get through if we don't let the guys offering them break through?
How noble of Neil Cavuto, looking out for the forgotten Republican candidates. Unfortunately, he didn't have a problem last month when his own Fox So-Called News hosted a Republican debate and excluded those very same candidates from participating. Fox So-Called News, your #1 source for blatant hypocrisy. And the very